Leo about it. Let's put that in the email chain, see if he's okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would work. As long as you're not voting or anything,
Yeah.
let's just make sure.
Okay.
On you.
Let me mute. Is it mute? Okay. Might work probably. I'm gonna put in the chain and an email chain and see what
Yeah.
Julio thinks about that.
Yeah. And I wasn't saying don't have that meeting, just push it back 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And put it between the next two, because that would have been the third.
It's too much people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't have too many people here right now.
Yeah.
And we did last week. It's not just your committee, people are on other committees too. So we're trying to not have more than two a week. We're trying not to do 2 days in a row. Seeing whatever we can do to get a quorum. All right, let's start the webinar.
Well, Leila, whenever you're presenting, feel free to grab the here so you can. We would actually have to wait a little bit more, right? Like,
Yeah, I wanted to wait a couple minutes.
Yeah. But if you want to like make yourself comfortable, yeah, you can go ahead. Yeah. And I think who is Diana's coming to it.
Yeah.
And Rosa too. She told me she would be coming too.
Okay. So we're just late arriving today.
It's a comfort.
It is.
And before you start, John, can I just have to call roll for both committees? We don't have to do that yet.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, by the way.
Yeah.
Good. But I'm gonna push it, I think. No, too many, I know, no, I saw the email. Oh, no, that was. That's still like functioning? Oh, okay, okay. So the search engine is not working at all? Or just the whole website is like shut down?
Just a few more minutes, folks. That's the employees telling you they're unhappy, blaming it on. Yep. I didn't hear you. Six. You, but we're almost 10 minutes past. So
Yeah, that's good. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Today we have two presentations, one by Leila Molina from New York City Smoke Free. Specifically, she will be discussing Reality Check, which is a student-led adult support program that works to produce change in the community through education, advocacy, outreach, political education, and media campaign. Before we proceed with this first meeting, we need to call roll, right? Yep.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to call roll for both committees. We're going to start with Education, Health, and Human Services first. If you're joining us on Zoom, please remember to unmute yourself when I call your name, acknowledge, and then mute yourself again. Let's start with Jonathan Martinez.
Present.
You, Rosie Moda. Thank you. Sylvia Augusto. Grisel Amador. Damian Andrade. Jalea Bailey. Joan Body. Esteban Chavez. Thank you. Jamie Freed. Thank you. Nicole Huang. Cynthia Jeffers. Barbara Lee. Marilyn Melman. Joanna Romero. Pat Ruiz.
Here.
Thank you. Pat, you do not count towards the quorum. Colina Sorma. Thank you. Six present, 5 count towards quorum. The committee does not have a quorum. We will move to Parks and Environment. We'll start with Diana Aguilar. Thank you. Sylvia Augusto. Esteban Chavez. Thank you. Mary Jo Eister. Diana Gonzalez. Nicole Huang. Daniel Kaminsky. Jeremy Kaplan. Aaron Keith. Paul Mack. 2 present. You do not have a quorum. We can't vote on anything.
Right, thank you. Before we proceed to the presentation, I just want to thank Diana for putting together part of the meeting. And I want to also thank Caitlin for hosting the meeting the last week, correct? Last week. And our my committee chair, vice chair, Rosa Mota too is present, so thank you for coming. If you want to say anything before we start? All right, so I'll pass the mic to Leila for the presentation. And thank you again.
I don't know. Oh, perfect. It is working. Thank you all again for having me today. It's great to be here. My name is Layla, and I work with the NYC Smoke Free program and the Reality Check program. You may have been here when my counterpart, Julia Cuthbertson, spoke about NYC Smoke Free and the community engagement aspect, but I'm going to be speaking more about the Reality Check side of things. So I'm going to talk really briefly about the NYC Smoke-Free initiatives. I don't want to talk your ear off because I know Julie already had mentioned them before, but just, oh, I'm so sorry, next slide. Thank you. So just to speak briefly about those 4 initiatives that we have. The first one is to reduce youth exposure to tobacco marketing at the point of sale. So essentially what we want to do there is ensure that when youth are entering convenience stores, bodegas, anywhere where they might be making a purchase in a retail environment, that they're not encouraged or they don't have that temptation to buy a tobacco product, whether that is a traditional cigarette, an e-cigarette, or any sort of combustible or non-combustible tobacco product. So that can be something like the Zyn pouches that have been more popular lately. You kind of put them up between your gums and it delivers tobacco into the body. So that's what we mean when we say non-combustible. It doesn't have to be lit up. So we do overall want to reduce the number of youth who initiate smoking and then overall end the tobacco epidemic in New York City. And so one of the other initiatives that we have that Julia must have spoken a little bit more in depth is the smoke-free housing policy, as well as the smoke-free air to reduce secondhand smoke. And in those initiatives, Julia essentially will speak to landlords and managements and offices to try and resolve any tenant issues that might come up because of smoking in apartments and condos in areas where there's more than one person living. So those are typically the calls that we get for smoke-free housing. And so we do this through an approach of community engagement and youth engagement. And I'm going to talk about that a little more in the next few slides. Essentially, we'll talk to legislators, elected officials, and community boards like CD7 right now. Go to the next slide. So a little bit more about Reality Check. We do like to say that it is a student-led, adult-supported program. The point is not for us as the adults to kind of take front and center. We are there to support students, but we do want to make sure that they're able to grow and develop and just become the leaders that we know that they are. So we are always there for support, but we do like to encourage them, again, to take the forefront. It is a statewide program, so we have chapters all the way up almost by Canada and Plattsburgh. all the way down to Long Island, all throughout New York. So it is great when we can get together through something like the Youth Summit, which I'll talk about a little more later as well, and just let students from different districts and different walks of life really get to talk to one another and speak to one another. And we do have NYC Smoke Free in all 5 boroughs, including Staten Island. We don't want to exclude them. And so the whole point is to educate people on the tobacco industry and tobacco products. It's never to shame people who are smokers or who have been previous smokers. It's never to make people feel like they're being penalized. It's simply to educate and to ensure that students are that they're able to have this information before they might initiate smoking. We know that most people who do start smoking are at the age of 13, so we want to make sure that we are getting this information to them before they make those decisions. And again, we do work to produce this change in communities through a mix of community engagement and youth engagement. So education, advocacy, outreach, political education. We do have a yearly event coming up called Legislative Education Day. And that's when we go up to Albany for the day and we speak with elected officials and state legislators about NYC Smoke Free and Reality Check. It's actually next Wednesday. So a lot of our students are going to be participating. They're very excited. And so that's one of the big events that we do with our youth. And as I mentioned, we do just aim to expose the tobacco industry and deceptive marketing tactics. We also are aware that tobacco is sacred to many indigenous communities. That is never the tobacco practices that we're talking about. We mean commercialized tobacco. Again, we're focusing on the industry versus indigenous communities that use this for sacred reasons. Okay, and next slide, sorry. So just to go into one of the initiatives for Reality Check, as I mentioned, it's to reduce youth exposure at the retail environment. So we want to make sure that students aren't exposed to this in the retail space. Realistically, we know that they often are, whether that is tobacco products right in front of them, or that there are different types of marketing like posters and signs that they can see, whether physically or on social media and in the media in general. So something that we like to do with them is the Retail Observation Project. So students might make note of retailers near their schools and homes that sell tobacco products, and we'll have them answer questions and analyze the influence that this might have on their peers and themselves. Sometimes we're able to go in and talk to store owners about their experience about the tobacco products that they're selling. The reality is that the majority of public schools are within 1,000 feet of a tobacco retail seller. So typically it's not a question of if, it's a question of when students will be exposed. So again, we want to make sure they're prepared to see these things. Next slide. And two of the other initiatives that, again, Julia might have spoke about a little more in the last meeting, smoke-free air to reduce exposure to secondhand smoke, as well as the voluntary adoption of smoke-free housing policies. So we know that secondhand smoke, unfortunately, causes thousands of deaths each year, over 40,000 non-smoker related deaths. So these are people who may have never smoked in their lives or are not current smokers, and they're still affected by this practice. In New York City, we are aware that lots of luxury condos and apartment complexes now are smoke-free voluntarily. But we do know that that doesn't necessarily mean that people don't smoke in their homes, that they don't smoke in common spaces as well. So to help try to combat those tactics, we do a mixture of town halls, we have assemblies, we do come to community board meetings to speak. We might write op-eds that hopefully get published so the community can see them. And we do lots of tabling events, essentially just trying to get the word out there. And also our website, people do utilize that if they want to make a complaint, for example, or if they're having an issue in their own housing. Next slide. And then one of the final initiatives that we have is to eliminate pro-tobacco imagery from youth-rated movies and the internet. So this is to ensure that youth aren't exposed to tobacco, to nicotine, to smoking in PG-13 related films or media or social media, which is a little more difficult to handle. We know that over the last 5 years, 60% of movies that are rated PG-13 have shown tobacco imagery. And many students and many youth in general are influenced by this. If they see someone that they look up to, if they see a celebrity or a character that they really like smoking, it does in a way encourage them to pick up the same habits or pick up the same practices. So some of the tactics that we've used to try and combat that are movie screenings about smoking, movie screenings that show smoking and that don't show smoking, and just kind of having a question and answer session as well about the tactics that are in the movie. We have written letters to studios and production companies. That isn't always, I would say, we don't always see fruition with that, because a lot of those studios and production companies kind of just want to keep making money the way they make money. But we did see a success with Lucasfilms, who are the Star Wars franchise. They did commit to ensuring that any PG-13 related films will not show any type of smoking. So that was a really big win, but the work continues. Next slide. And so we have lots of different events and activities for Reality Check students. Again, we do focus mostly on high school students, so ages 13 to 18, even though we do also give presentations, and we do kind of overlap with middle school. There might be 7th and 8th graders who are 13 years old, but we do focus more on the high school population. So like I mentioned, there are letter writing campaigns, meeting with elected officials, which we'll be doing next week in Albany, and then throughout the legislative year as well in New York City. There's lots of opportunity for collaboration with other youth throughout New York State. We host movie nights. Youth are able to write opportunity editorials as well. We even had some youth get op-eds published in papers, which has been amazing. So there's lots of opportunity for involvement and for activity. We know that some students don't necessarily like to be maybe like the face, like this young woman right here. Some don't always love being like big tabling, or they might have other strengths, maybe writing or like researching. So we try to make sure that we have opportunities for everyone. Next slide. I'm not sure that video might be able to play there because of the PDF, but I can make sure that I think you have it and you can send it out if that's okay. But this is just a little bit more about Legislative Education Day, like I mentioned. It is a yearly trip that we take. Again, that students are able to speak with elected officials. They're able to meet Reality Check youth students statewide and experience the Capital Region as a whole. It is a very long day, so we do leave Manhattan at 7 a.m. and we're in Albany for the majority of the day. But it is a great experience for students. A lot of the time, it might be the first time that they become civically engaged, and it's a great way for them to be exposed to that and kind of just get a gist for what that is like. So yeah, it's a great experience for all of them. And then one of the other, next slide, please. One of the other videos that I'll be able to send out, hopefully I sent it, so maybe next week you can all see it, is about our summer internships. So each year we do host a summer internship program. This year it was with the Future and Options program, but last year it was with Columbia University for their scientific enrichment program. So it is a 6-week program. And through a lot of the internship program, students are paid. So they are getting paid while they're with us for the 6 weeks, which is great. And they learn everything from the tobacco marketing and tobacco industry to our smoke-free media tactics and smoke-free media campaign. This past year was great. We had about 15 students from across the 5 boroughs, and they all wanted to remain with Reality Check throughout the school year, which was amazing for us. And I'd like to say that they did learn a lot. It was a great experience, but in the video, you'll be able to hear their testimonials. I know coming from me, it's like, she might be paid to say that, but they did have a great time, and you can hear more about that in the video. But again, it is something that we do every year, and we really enjoy hosting them. But that is really the gist of the program. I have my email here if anybody has any questions, or if you ever wanted to book a presentation. We do, again, work with high schools and sometimes middle schools, whether that's maybe talking to PTA or talking to parents, or really anybody who's interested in this work. But again, my information's here. Please feel free to reach out, and I'm here if there are any questions.
Thank you for the presentation. I do have a follow-up question. In terms of the program, how this program is implemented at the school level and what this program looks like?
Oh, okay, great question. So we do have our website, NYC Smoke Free, which I can also send over. And there we have a one-pager which lists each of the reality check managers for each borough and how to contact us. So sometimes we'll have principals contact us, sometimes we'll have teachers contact us. And if they'd like to start a chapter after school, all they have to do is reach out to us. We'll hold an interest meeting at their school and see what students are interested or available. And depending on their availability, we might come to the school bi-weekly, weekly, whatever is in their best interest. And it's really as simple and easy as that. As long as we see some interest there, even if it's one student, that's happened sometimes when it's just a handful of students, but we do want to make sure that we engage them. But yeah, it's pretty simple. It's all on our website, and whoever's interested can reach out.
How long is the program?
So we do work with youth from 13 to 18. So if a student, let's say they start in their freshman year of high school, it would be up until their senior year of high school. So it depends typically when somebody wants to join.
It's like 4 years.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah, but even though we do, like I mentioned, we do give presentations and work with middle school youth, but our focus is high school. So the reality check program will start, if you're 13, you can like join that way.
I don't have any other questions, but I can open the floor for questions. And Jeremy,
So I asked this of Julia, and I fleshed it out a little bit afterwards, but the program is smoke-free, but I keep hearing tobacco smoke. So is it smoke-free or just tobacco?
It is tobacco products, smoke, anything nicotine related, anything smoke that you can breathe in that isn't necessarily like cannabis related, anything that has to do with tobacco and nicotine. Unfortunately, because of our grant, we don't cover the jurisdiction of cannabis. We can give resources for that, but we're strictly focused on nicotine and tobacco products.
Next question regarding smoke-free housing. That's just about tobacco smoke. Somebody could smoke joints all day in their home?
So again, we do have partners who handle that because of the nature of our grant and the way that we're funded. We aren't allowed to kind of step inside jurisdiction as much. We do have, like I mentioned, resources and partners to help on that side. So if somebody does reach out and that is the specific issue, we will kind of move that and send them to our partners or let our partners know to alert them so that they can help in that area.
And similar with regard to advertising, I don't know if this is the case with smoking tobacco, but everybody has ads in their pocket now. I don't know what search I did last week, but suddenly I'm getting advertisements for THC gummies. I suppose if I did a different kind of search, I'd be getting advertisements for cigarettes. Is there anything that you're lobbying for on the state level to prevent those sorts of advertisements?
Well, because again, we're kind of constricted by our grant, we're not allowed to lobby. So we can't go to an elected official and say, hey, can you support this bill? Can you look at this legislation? We educate them and we try to ensure that they're up to date and as informed as possible on these issues and these resolutions. We do have partners, for example, the American Lung Association, the American Heart Association, who are able to lobby directly. So a lot of times at these meetings, we'll have an advocate with us because even though we can't kind of cross that red tape, they're able to ask directly while we provide most of the education.
Thank you.
I do have a follow-up question. In terms of lobbying, when the students like join your group to Albany, are they able to lobby?
No, because we are paying for the transportation, we're paying for them to be there. That means they're also under the grant cycle in that jurisdiction. So no, they also don't lobby. And we ensure that before we get to Albany that they're aware of that. We go through lots of sessions with them and prepare them to kind of have those conversations with legislators. And lots of times for us, it's easiest when we open a conversation and are just very honest with elected officials. We might say, we're funded by a state. We are not allowed to lobby, but we are here to help educate you and talk about NYC Smoke Free. So yeah, students aren't allowed to lobby with us.
So in terms of the curriculum, the students that join this program, what exactly they do? They do like a one pager for like for a specific issue, or what exactly that looks like?
It really depends. We like to see what the students are interested in, but there's a wide range of variety. It's not one set curriculum. So for the summer, it is a little more, we have like a curriculum from week to week. So for example, 1 week in the summer might be dedicated mostly to smoke-free media and smoke-free movies. And we might say the assignment for this week is to write an op-ed, maybe based on something that you've seen in the media or any information that you can find from the CDC, from the World Health Organization. And we try to take them on outings as well that are related to tobacco. Sometimes we do things like Chalk the Walk has been always really fun for students. So we might go to an open space. I know we went to Staten Island before, and we kind of just have them, we're with them, and we all like do like an art or a mural on the street and the sidewalk. Sometimes we work with malls and retailers, and they'll like help us and allow us to do it as well. So it's a mix of, I would say, more academic, as in like writing and doing presentations, as well as a kind of outing and trying to have like enrichment in other ways too.
So it sounds even though you're not able to lobby or like develop the skills for students specifically in that area, there's a lot of educational value to the program.
Yeah, I would like to think there is. Students, a lot of times, especially if they're with us throughout the summer or throughout the school year, they're able to gain presentation skills, leadership skills, and a lot of times students even reach back out to us for college recommendation letters, and it becomes a very great bond. And yes, we've seen a lot of students like blossom and open up, and they're already leaders in their community, but become even more confident in their leadership skills.
In terms of opportunities for students participating in this program, are there any internships within your program for these students or like anything related to that nature?
So for NYC Smoke Free, we do work through, like for example, the Future and Options program. So it is like they're hosting the internship, and we're one of the partner sites that works with them. So we'll be the work site, and that's how we typically will get our students. I would have to see if any of other public health solutions as a whole, the entire company, if there are any specific internship programs. But for us, that's how we work through it. So Future and Options, and then the year before was the Columbia University Scientific Enrichment Program. So not through us specifically, but they use us as a work site.
Are students able to get stipends for these internships, or if this is like a volunteer base?
So it depends on the program that they're coming with. So for example, the Future and Options and the Columbia University, they were, at least Future and Options was paying the students directly. So they were working, I believe it was $16 an hour, and they would work 25 hours a week. So 150 hours throughout the whole program, and they would get paid from Future and Options. So we, through NYC Smoke Free, would have an orientation with Future and Options program. So they would teach us a little bit about the payment process, so we'd ensure that the students were getting paid. And I believe those programs also would provide them with Metro cards as well, because sometimes they would come into our central office. Or the offices, whichever borough that they were in. So yeah, they're not necessarily a stipend per se, but I know the majority of them are getting paid weekly through their program.
Thank you. And someone else has a question.
Hi, thank you. Has the organization done any work in the community, like in parks or health fairs? And if so, what did that look like?
Yeah, so I know that it's been sometimes a bit of a struggle, specifically trying to reach out to some schools in Sunset Park. My partner Julia has been able to attend some like Black Lives, Black Lungs screenings, or essentially host those. We do have a lot of work that we still need to do in regards to Sunset Park. But what we're trying to do is host screenings of that Black Lives, Black Lungs documentary, try to engage with more schools if possible, because we do have our office here. So we are within the community, but it's just trying to kind of break those boundaries, and kind of, it can be difficult sometimes when you reach out to like the head and then you're kind of waiting around. So we have done work throughout Brooklyn, but we are trying to focus on Sunset Park, especially as our grant cycle renews.
Thank you.
I'll move to the chat. And the
So
virtual.
Talisha Gonzalez writes, in Sunset Park, we have tobacco shops that sell toys and have smoking products side by side with toys, even in the windows. Does your organization address these structures in terms of reporting or targeting them for community organizing?
Yeah, so we actually did have a meeting with our partners from the Department of Health. And we did see that the FDA has released a website link. I can try to send that to you as well, so you can add it for complaints specifically for issues like that, for smoke shops, for any sort of smoke shop that has been popping up. For us as well, we might kind of stand behind any council members or city council members who have been speaking about that, bring awareness maybe to campaign or educate our students about it. But we can be constrained sometimes, again, because of lobbying. But we do try to bring awareness through education and just essentially making sure that people know where it is and what's happening. So that's one of the ways that we work with that.
Rocco writes, does the program empower, train young people to speak to support the smoking adults around them to quit smoking?
That's a great question. So we know that it can be a touchy subject and difficult when you're around family members who are smoking and you might not feel that you are empowered to talk to them about that. We do have resources for and partners really who help with smoking cessation. So while we don't necessarily provide things like a smoke quitting coach or nicotine patches or nicotine gum, we do have partners who do help with those things, like the NYC Quit Line or the New York State Quit Line. So we do try to educate and inform students and adults of that, as well as our partners who do provide other smoking cessation services.
Just as a follow-up question, can you connect like the students or like the family seeking services to those specific?
Absolutely, yeah. And that's actually a great idea for maybe like a topic to speak about during the summer, or even just a lesson plan that we can have with students, because we know that is an issue as well. But yes, definitely our partners are able to provide more direct support and resources with, again, like the things like patches or gum or a coach to help with quitting.
Anyone else has any other questions in the public? More questions? All right. With that, thank you so much for the presentation. It was really interesting, and definitely we'll follow up with you about the videos and the website links and any other additional information that you would like to distribute. And I definitely will continue the conversation. Thank you so much. Who's speaking for? Oh, sure. Should I?
Oh, okay.
Should I introduce you? Or?
One minute, Adam.
No worries. Take your time.
So next we have Adam. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your last name. Tanaka is representing Playground New York City, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to transforming New York City through play. They operate an adventure playground called The Yard on Governor's Island and partner with community organizations across the city to support children's play. With that, I just roll the mic to Adam.
Thank you so much. And sorry I can't be with you all in person today, but I had the pleasure of presenting to the Parks Committee in October, I believe. And so this is in part an update to that group, but also very, very excited to share this with the Education Committee as well. So thank you for having me. I'm just going to give a very brief overview about Playground NYC. The introduction gave a good summary of, our core activities. But then I want to tell you a little bit about some progress we've made in identifying potential locations in Sunset Park. And I'm very interested in the community board's input and advice. So let me just, I'm just going to send a request so I can share my screen. Great. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay. Can everyone see my screen here?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So I don't know if any of you have visited Governor's Island or seen the Yard. We're actually located very close to the ferry stop that goes from both Sunset Park and Brooklyn Bridge Park. But the Yard is our flagship adventure playground that Playground NYC has been operating for about a decade. And in that time, we've welcomed over 50,000 children, mostly for free, to the Yard, which is really this transformative environment where kids are able to create and build and recreate their environment. It's basically a playground made out of upcycled materials where where parents are not allowed. And the only adults that are allowed in the space are actually trained play workers whose job is to supervise the children's play, encourage the children's play, but not direct, instruct, or try and control the children's play. And what this produces is really an incredible environment where, kids are able to do what they want. And increasingly, I think in this digital, highly scheduled world, it's something that kids, especially in cities, don't have much access to, this environment of free play. And, to cut to the chase, we have really seen, a lot of success over the past 10 years, and we're now looking for a second location so we can bring the benefits of adventure play and free play to more children. So as I mentioned, our mission is to transform the city through play. Mostly we do this through our programming at our adventure playground on Governor's Island, but we also provide pop-ups in city neighborhoods. We've actually done some in Sunset Park in the past. And we provide professional development for educators, and also training for play workers, which is actually, a defined kind of profession and particular way of interacting with kids and encouraging their free play. I should also mention, I should have mentioned this at the start, I'm a resident of CB7. I live on 40th Street near the park, and I adore Sunset Park, so it's also just a joy to be able to share this concept with the neighborhood. So here's an image of the Yard. Every time you visit it, it basically looks different because, the elements move around, the kids construct and reconstruct, the environment. And really it is a space, built by children for children. This image here is actually not an image of the Yard. This is an image of one of our pop-ups, which we do, on open streets or, at festivals and so on. But here you have some images more of the Yard, which show, this combination of upcycled materials, interactive elements. We have hammers. We have an area called the Smash Zone where you can just break things. We have a zip line. Kids can paint. Kids can build things. And it's really amazing, just seeing the impact that this kind of free play environment has on the collaboration between the kids, but also on the physical activity. And, one of the questions we get a lot is it dangerous? Do kids get injured? In fact, studies have shown that adventure playgrounds are, 5 times safer than conventional playgrounds. And, partly that is because there are actually trained play workers who are there to watch and supervise and make sure that, access from parents over the years really just saying, this is, my kid comes back from here a little dirty, but always glowing at they got to plan their day and run their day and no one was telling them what to do. Here's a little summary of, our impact. So we've been going for almost a decade. The way the model works is during the summer, we have a camp during the week, which is paid access. But then that cross-subsidizes free weekends from March until November. And so the vast majority of the children that come through our gates are actually accessing the services for free. And we've also organized these pop-ups throughout the 5 boroughs and partnered with a lot of city agencies and nonprofits. So we launched the search last summer to find a second location. We absolutely love Governor's Island, and we don't intend to leave Governor's Island. But for any of you that have been there, you'll appreciate that exactly what makes Governor's Island such a wonderful place to be also makes it a challenging place to be because there's no residential community, there are no schools. It's hard to get to. In the winter, there's a significant drop in visitation. And we really want to find a location now that is closer to homes, closer to schools, and would enable us to serve a more diverse and consistent population. And adventure playgrounds are actually a pretty established concept in other parts of the world, in Europe and Asia particularly. And there, the really classic concept of an adventure playground, it is that it is embedded in the community and has very, very close ties and a recurring base of users who come on a frequent basis. While the Governor's Island location right now, it operates a bit more as a destination concept and not one that's embedded in a neighborhood. We have capital funds in reserve to build out our second location. And as I mentioned, our current operating model is self-sustaining, so the camp revenue offsets free weekends. So all we really need is free or substantially discounted land. And to give you a sense of order of magnitude, on Governor's Island, we pay about $7,000 a year for our lease. So as I mentioned, I'm a resident of Sunset Park. I adore Sunset Park, and I really think that there's a great opportunity in Sunset Park for this kind of offering, not only because of the diversity of our community and the many young people in it, but also because there are some areas along the waterfront that I know are currently in redevelopment and might provide opportunities for this kind of community serving use. Since I last presented to the community board in October, we have had an initial meeting with EDC. They mentioned the Brooklyn Army Terminal as one potential location. And I also met with Council Member Avilas's office, and they mentioned that Pier 6 might also be an interesting opportunity for us since it's currently being planned and there is some space being held for community serving recreation and open space. So I'm very interested in the community board's thoughts on these two locations as well as any others. As I understand it, this may be an optimal time to propose, community recreation use for the Pier 6 master plan and design. So I'm really, really interested in, anyone's insights on where that process stands. As for Brooklyn Army Terminal, we see some opportunities, but it's also a little challenging given that it's a fully hardscaped environment. And we have identified a couple of areas, actually, including the area right here, that we think could actually be a pretty interesting site for an adventure playground. The other incredible coincidence is that the ferry terminal here, if you get on the ferry there, you arrive, the next stop is Governor's Island. And then 2 minutes from that stop on Governor's Island, you get to our other adventure playground location. So I actually think there could be really incredible synergies in terms of programming and being able to take kids from Sunset Park to Governor's Island and do really, really fun, kind of joint programming across the two sites. Let me just clear my scribbles here. So this gives you a little bit more information on the site requirements that we're looking for. Ideally, it's about 10,000, 15,000 square feet. We do need utilities, ideally dirt or grass on the ground, not asphalt, although, there could be opportunities to redevelop the asphalt into a green space. Shade is also helpful for sunny days. And, we know it's challenging, as an essential, so it's more of a nice to have, but some indoor space nearby would be useful, especially for the colder months, or if there's inclement weather, we can offer our services in an indoor space. And actually our programming works quite well in an indoor space as well. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present, and very excited to answer your questions and hear any thoughts and advice you may have.
Thank you. I do have a question. In terms of population, what would be an estimate, at least, of how many people will be visiting this playground?
It's a great question. Governor's Island is not necessarily a useful benchmark for what visitation might be in a Sunset Park location or a location embedded in a neighborhood. To give you some sense, we estimate, oh, actually, we know because people sign waivers, we get about 8,000 children a year at the Governor's Island location. I actually think we would get more in a community-oriented location that's more accessible. So maybe it'll be, 10,000, 12,000. The other thing is that currently on Governor's Island during the weekdays in the spring and the fall, we do not offer any programming. We're closed. And I actually think that there would be opportunities to develop partnerships with local schools to actually activate the site during the school week in, the spring and in the fall. And we've actually already had some initial discussions with some educators about that as like, during recess, they would be able to come and use the yard, or there could be classes around construction or using, different kinds of materials. So I actually anticipate we would get higher visitation at a location in a neighborhood like Sunset Park. I don't know if in terms of visits per day, I think on a busy day we get, 100 kids, maybe a little more.
In terms of trying to open the second location, what is the biggest challenges at the moment besides trying to find a place?
I would say that that is the biggest challenge. I mean, it's really about finding a landlord that is motivated and excited, and also, threading the needle of a space that is available with also a space that has, the qualities that make it conducive to be an adventure playground. So we've actually had some good, I should have mentioned this before, we've also had some good discussions with the Parks Department. We presented to the leadership of the Parks Department in October, actually shortly after I met with you in the fall. And so we are in an active discussion with them. One of their concerns is they don't want to remove space that is currently landscaped green space from a park. So they're more interested in steering us towards maybe underutilized recreational space or like obsolete tennis courts or things like that. So I really think it's about finding the space. In terms of the financial model, I'm not that concerned. As I mentioned, our current model is self-sustaining. So we actually don't do significant fundraising currently. If we were to shift to a model that was open throughout a longer period of the year, we might have to fundraise, but I'm not, overly concerned about that. And we have members of the board who have a lot of experience with that. And we've also been told that, our model could be very conducive to corporate partnerships, such as Home Depot and other kinds of, companies that are all about DIY and that sort of thing. So we would actually be excited to, to figure out an alternate funding model if need be.
In terms of pricing, you mentioned that weekends are free for kids. So what about like the rest of the week? Like how much the parents paid for this specific experience?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's actually a sliding scale, and it ranges from, $50 a day to slightly over $100 a day.
Do you ever thought about like having any programs besides the weekend for individuals that live in the community with low incomes, especially our community? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think that's one of the reasons that we're so excited to locate in a neighborhood is to proactively engage with community partners and figure out what might be the programming that would be most, impactful and beneficial to the community. One example would be programs with schools and different kinds of schools, whether it's technical schools or more arts-oriented, schools or, different age groups. Really, our target age range is from 4 to 10. But I could actually imagine us going higher into the 12, 13 age if we had structured partnerships with schools where they were using our site to educate kids about construction or educate kids about materials. There's also an environmental sustainability aspect, obviously, to the offering in terms of upcycling and recycling and figuring out how to extend the useful life of materials.
Can you talk more about the pop-up street events that you do? And
Absolutely. Sorry, did you have another question?
no, go ahead. Sorry.
So, we do those pretty frequently. They tend to be in partnership with either a public sector entity like a Department of Transportation, or maybe a park. We've also done partnerships with different conservancies and friends of, organizations in different parts of the city. In general, they require some sort of funding support because they do require us to cover the costs of play worker salaries to be there. So a pop-up might cost, $5,000, and we would need some typically support from a partner to execute that. So, in general, we don't do pop-ups unless there's some sort of contribution from a community partner. And one of the things we've been thinking about is perhaps we can engage city councilors' offices or others to help cover those costs, because we work really well in things like open streets festivals, and those kinds of community events where everyone's out together in the public space.
You mentioned
And I
that-
should mention, actually, sorry, before I finish that thought, we have been thinking about doing those sorts of pop-ups in Sunset Park. If there was potentially a path towards a second location, one thing I think could work really well would be to, start to engage the community more intensively, so that people can become familiar with us. We can get to know different organizations, different residents. And I think, you asked earlier about what some of the challenges have been about finding a second location. One of them has been that we are looking kind of citywide. And so it's been hard for us to drill too deep into any one neighborhood because we're looking at sites in all different places. And I actually think that narrowing down and starting to maybe do some pop-ups and some temporary programming in one particular neighborhood so that people get to know us could be a really good way to go. And that's actually how the location at Governor's Island came about, is they invited us to participate in a festival 10 years ago about play and so on. And they liked what we did so much, they invited us to become a permanent tenant.
You mentioned that you had a conversation with council member Alexa Aviles. Do you ever propose having any funding from them to do pop-up in this community?
Well, that's, I think, exactly what the next step would be. I think if there was some interest and a potential site that we could identify, I think that would be a really, really logical and very exciting next step.
Go ahead.
So I have a few, but there are also some hands up as well. But I had wanted to ask, how many square feet do you need?
About 10 to 15,000 square feet is ideal. We can go smaller, but it starts to constrain the number of children we can serve and limit the impact.
I want to say I'm a little cautious about the location at the Army Terminal. 25 years ago, before we had Bush Terminal Piers Park, which is still incomplete, EDC proposed a park for that location. And our community board at that time was not crazy about the location. We're an underserved community when it comes to parkland, and they felt, one, it wasn't that close to people's homes or many people's homes, but two, it was much closer to the residents of Bay Ridge than it was to the residents of Sunset Park. So we asked EDC to look for another location, which they found at Bush Terminal. Now, we have the park at Bush Terminal, so maybe people feel differently about the location at the Army Terminal. But I have not had that conversation before, so that was the conversation previously. But it strikes me, you use recycled materials. We have the world's largest recycler in Sunset Park. You reached out to Sims
Yes.
Hugo New, which might have actually some space on their campus.
I had not made that connection, and I love that idea. I mean, if any of you have a suggestion of how to make contact, I would be delighted to explore that thread.
Why don't you reach out to me tomorrow? I'm happy to help you make that contact.
Great.
I think that would be a good connection for a variety of reasons, and they are located on 29th Street, so much closer to the center line of the community.
Fantastic. If I reach out to Natasha, will she be able to share your contact with me?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you.
And the last thing I wanted to say is district managers talk to each other. I had a lovely conversation with one of my colleagues today who's interested in chatting with you, but I don't want to give up our adventure playground. So please only speak to her about pop-ups.
Okay, well, glad that there's buzz. Thank you.
Questions in the public before we jump to the virtual questions? Did anyone else has any question?
My hand has been up.
Oh, go ahead.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. And this is the first I've heard of this. I'm Pat Ruiz. I'm the what am I? First Vice Chair, Community Board 7. And my question is two questions actually. One is how long is the playtime for a child or a group of children allowed? And number two, what do you have for visually impaired, mobility impaired children?
So to your first question, there is no time limit. The kids can stay as long as they like. Our current operating time on free weekends is from 12 to 4, but I think we would extend that if we were located in a neighborhood. Part of that is just linked to the hours that are busiest on Governor's Island, and it tends to peak in that like early afternoon time. In terms of your question on the physically impaired and visually impaired, it's a really, really good question. I know for the physically impaired, a lot of the site is on ground level and it is wheelchair accessible. And there are climbing things, but that's actually just a small fraction of what you can do. To be very honest, I'm not aware of what, facilities we have for the visually impaired, but I know that the play workers are trained to engage with children of all sorts of abilities. And so I'm very confident that there is programming that's available. I just don't know the details.
Yeah, I really would appreciate knowing more. My granddaughter has cerebral palsy, and we're always looking for different things and different places for her to go and to feel welcome, included.
Yeah.
Like Urban Air is not an inclusive place
Yes,
for her.
yes, yeah,
So I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
of course. Thank you for your questions.
I want to also voice my support for something within the specifically population, the visually and the disabled population that probably definitely will benefit from this type of engagement. And more questions, right?
So I don't see additional hands, but I see people have typed some questions. You may have already answered this. Maria Roca asks, what are fees during the summers?
Yeah. So there's a sliding scale, 50 to 100 a day.
Thank you. Stacy Boyd asks, what other neighborhoods are on the short list?
To be honest, there is no other neighborhood where we're having as intense engagement right now, and we're hoping to gain some momentum in Sunset Park. We are looking at some options in the Prospect Park zone as well, but I think they are longer term. And as I mentioned, we are having a dialogue with the Parks Department. Maybe they will provide some other ideas for us, but as of now, Sunset Park is top of mind, and I am curious in the board's perspective on the Pier 6 site and whether they have any insight into the planning process there.
The board has voted, I have to look back, but the board has asked EDC to have Parks Department manage that because we are a little dubious about EDC's ability to manage parks, since that's not their area of expertise.
Mm-hmm.
I see Pat's hand is up again.
Yeah, I was just thinking about $50 a day. That might be a lot of money for lower income families. And you did say that you have not really done any fundraising. Maybe that's an opportunity for you to reach out to some of the not-for-profit organizations or any organization that may want to sponsor a few children of low-income families so they can enjoy that. In regard to Pier 6, I am the president of the Boricua Festival Committee who has held events at that pier. That pier itself, there is no escaping the heat. If that was somewhere that you were thinking of doing this on the
Pat, that's a
pier
different
itself.
location.
Excuse
Pat,
me?
you're talking about Brooklyn Army Terminal Pier 4. Pier
Isn't that
6,
part of,
Pier 6 is the pier that EDC is developing behind Bush Terminal.
Okay, I see. So would that be similar to four? Where it's all
No,
cement?
that one has trees.
That one has trees? So then take that back, but please take the suggestion of reaching out to some businesses who might want to sponsor some of the children who cannot afford $50 a day.
Yeah, yeah, no,
Thank
that's
you.
definitely the intent. And I think we would revisit our entire pricing model as we enter into a new neighborhood.
Most appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah. And I know which pier you're talking about. The images I've seen of the design scheme for Pier 6 is much more greenery and trees, and is really more of a landscaped concept.
Talisha Gonzalez wrote, not a question, but a kind request, especially having a child who loves your Governor's Island location. We have many multi-generational families in Sunset Park. Please also consider shade, shelter, and seating in the near vicinity of the playground with our older adults' needs in mind. Parents and caregivers can be a bit aggressive about these features at your current location, and safe, clean, and sufficient restrooms, please.
Great suggestions. Thank you.
We have more questions in, oh, go ahead. Do you have questions?
Hi, just two suggestions, one for potentially more so pop-ups, houses of worship, and also public libraries, if you've done anything with them. I remember one time Central branch for the library had a, not related to this organization, but when my son was small, I remember that they had an event with shredded paper, and I never saw him have so much fun with anything. So maybe the libraries?
Yeah. I mean, we try and prioritize outdoor spaces. So if libraries have outdoor areas, I think that could be great. And certainly, I think we've done pop-ups in the past with church partners and religious organization partners.
Can you hear me? I guess since we're not at the stage where we're being asked to write a letter of support for any particular location, what can we do for you next? I know you're going to connect with Jeremy on the location that he was talking about, connecting you with a recycler. Yeah. But in your initial public search, I'm sure there are people who reached out about like different locations in Sunset Park. So what can we do next for you?
Well, I really appreciate you asking the question because that's exactly what I was going to ask you. I mean, my sense is that the right next step is if there is a potential for the community board to, author some sort of statement saying that they support the idea of an adventure playground in Sunset Park, I think that would be very powerful. And I don't know whether that can be shared with the EDC or with the council member's office, or even with the Parks Department, but that sort of statement, demonstrating interest. And also if you have advice of other organizations in Sunset Park that I should, or, that we should connect with, organizations that serve families. I know there's the Center for Family Life, there's Mixteca, there's many others. I would also be very happy to engage those organizations and build more of a constituency of support.
Outside of this meeting, Adam, you and I should have a conversation about all.
Okay, let's do it. Can you remind me of your name, sir? I'm sorry.
Jeremy.
Jeremy, great.
In terms of timeline, when were you thinking or hoping of, opening up a second location?
I mean, targeting 2027, but we are also happy to be patient, and we know, our current site is working very well, so we're happy to be patient, and we want to find the right site. Unfortunately, I have to go in a couple of minutes because initially my colleague was meant to present, but she became sick. But maybe I have time for one more question, but I really appreciate your suggestions. And if you have suggestions of any other next steps that we should do, I would, be very grateful.
Yeah, we'll do some internal outreach and then be in touch. Thank you so much for coming.
Of course. Thank you for your interest and for your questions. And Jeremy, I'll reach out to you afterwards. Have a good night. Thank you all.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.
Thank you. Well, with that, I think we can conclude the meeting today. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And thank you yourself, for organizing all of this. Thank you.